Wine, Bitcoin, and steak are three things that weirdly all meld really well together. I mean, if you nailed all three, you've got a great dinner and you have a good conversation to talk about with Bitcoin that'll just last forever.
We all have the incentive to root for each other because we have the same store of value.
Day to day, every year, the value of Bitcoin goes up, not measured in dollars, but measured in real world goods. That's like the long-term vision of sound money, where everything gets cheaper because we get better at making it.
Finally, I can ask someone that question. What do you think is the connection between Bitcoin, wine, and steaks?
Well, I think they're all kind of singular input items that fundamentally enter like a low time preference lifestyle, where Bitcoin is, as most people listening are aware, is low time preference money. Hold it for a long time, you're going to do well. It's not going to, like, you're not generally buying it for rocket ship, make a ton of money real quick, even though that does happen occasionally. If you're in it for that, you kind of just get shaken out quickly. But it's one thing, it's simple, just have Bitcoin. With wine, it's at its core one ingredient, which is grapes plus time. And that is like a pretty simple thing that adds a lot of enjoyment to other aspects of your life, where you can have a nice simple bottle of wine with friends and have a great conversation, or it enhances a nice meal. And the idea is, if you hold it for a while, it's going to get better generally. And the quicker you rush it, even opening a bottle, it's not going to be as good right away. So like, even the small little thing of opening a bottle, you want to give it some time to breathe, and it'll be a better experience. With steak, this is probably the newest part of my journey, was learning about nutrition through the lens of wanting to be a better business operator, where nutrition and my body were kind of the things that were holding me back from performance. And I realized that I wanted to be a better business person, so I need to increase the things I'm bad at. And I learned that just eating a ton of beef would be super beneficial for me through experience. Trying it, my brain fog went away, and I just had a lot more energy to do the work that I wanted to do. And so steak kind of, it's a bit of a meme to me, where it's like, just eat steak and you're going to be fine. Obviously, I eat a little bit more than that, but it's this base singular layer of a healthy diet, where when I just go full carnivore, and let's say I just eat steak for a few days or a week, I feel super energetic and like super almost like primal to like go out and do what I want to do. So wine, Bitcoin, and steak are three things that weirdly all meld really well together. I think wine and steak, you see the connection there. But I mean, if you nailed all three, you've got a great dinner that's fueling you up for a long-term future of building, and you have a good conversation to talk about with Bitcoin that'll just last forever. So
Yeah, it's funny that like, if you have a low time preference and you see the, like, as in a farm, and I think you also grew up on a farm, like we talked before the podcast, and I also grew kind of up on a farm, and you get this low time preference because you plant seed, like, depends on what are you doing on a farm, because you can do a lot of different things, but you're planting a seed, you're doing something and waiting a long period of time to get some reward, and you're doing it all over and over again, and you grow slowly, you grow steadily, you enjoy nature. And it's interesting that a digital thing is so connected with like nature and enjoying time. I also saw that one tweet of yours lately, that I think with the Apple Vision Pro, and the people are sitting with the Apple Vision Pro there, and there's no phone, and you said like something with nature is healing because there's no phone. Obviously, it's like a joking, but I really enjoyed that one. Yeah, but what's your thought on like growing up on a farm, having like a simpler life on a farm? And I experienced that life, like just doing the small tasks and the simple tasks, but building on a solid foundation and being connected with nature, and putting in like the proof of work. and then also making it anyways in that hyper globalized and digitalized world. It's like it's an interesting field to be in with Bitcoin and farming and wine. What's your thoughts on this?
Growing up on a farm, I kind of thought it was just normal, I guess. I grew up in a small town of 2,000, and even if people didn't have farms, it was very common to just go into nature and just do whatever, and not a ton of parent supervision because you know you couldn't get in a ton of trouble um, outside of trouble that maybe you create for yourself. So like you learn how to not fall in the river or not get lost, and I think that that's something that is just like it's these little things, these little skills that you develop as a kid, and like learning how to figure out and solve problems um, that if you grow up in a suburban neighborhood, maybe you're just not given that level of problem solving to have at a young age. Where it and also parents kind of want to protect you, and so it's a bit of freedom to make mistakes and kind of just play in the land, learn how nature works, and learn the consequences of little things. So um, in that you you just gain a lot of faith in yourself, and you realize that a lot of times things are left best untouched. So taking that mindset into money and Bitcoin is pretty just straightforward in that you learn that economies are best managed by individuals just doing their own thing, left untouched, and monetary policy is best left untouched and consistent, just like the laws of nature are consistent. If you leave money as a constant, things tend to um, work out pretty well. So with farming, it's the more and more farmers I meet, I've realized it's really hard to make it as a farmer unless you're an insanely large scale, and if you don't have a value added good, and if you don't have a larger audience than maybe your small town. Because I've been doing farmers markets for the last 3 years as my main source of in-person sales, and my main source of sales anyway. I didn't really want to have an online presence because I didn't want to work on my computer. I had it, but not seriously approaching it. And it's huge startup capital to have a tasting room and have employees and all that stuff. So I was really just bootstrapping the winery, going to farmers markets, and you meet a lot of small business people, a lot of farmers and everything. And I a lot of times think my work is really hard. I mean, I during the summer I do Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 3 day stretch of three markets, all 2 hours away from me. So it's 3 12-hour days back to back, and then I work the rest of the week as well. So it's super busy. But I a lot of times I'm like, man, that's so hard. I'm putting in so much work, and then I meet a farmer who's doing vegetables, and they might be selling a lot more than me as far as volume, but like their margins are a lot smaller, and they're up at 4 a.m. every morning picking the vegetables. Whereas all I have to do in the morning is drive to my wine cellar, pick up a few bottles of wine, and then get on the road because everything's packaged and ready for it. Um, Along with that, grapes are such a small part of the expense of making wine. I can't believe people grow grapes for a living outside of just super large scale, because the you need that value added part of it to really make it worthwhile. And so the connection to like wanting to be more global, online, just connect with the larger world works when you have a value added good, a packaged good that you can ship all over. Because if I was just selling to people in my neck of the woods, I have ski towns near me that there's people with money and they appreciate what I have. But it takes a lot of effort to get there. And my small town is super working class, definitely not a ton of money here. And if I was just trying to sell wine to them, not only are they small, but they can't really afford to value my product in the way that I believe it's worthwhile to be valued on like a greater market. So I've really just had to find the market that fits my product, that values it in the way that I believe it should be valued, based off its quality. And within that, it's connecting all these low time preference things and kind of just being a Bitcoiner individually that I fell into. Bitcoiners are the perfect people to be buying my product because they care about health, they care about supporting like small business and people that they see as their own to make it and make a good product and like do farming the right way, do wine the right way as far as not adding any bad ingredients to the wine, and having Bitcoin as global money, having that knowledge has connected me to a great sphere of people who also have that like long term time preference when it comes to business, which is how I'm building mine, and people that value that. So it's really just it's kind of been a perfect marriage between Bitcoin and farming, in a bit of a roundabout, but like looking backwards, it's a no brainer kind of way.
And now you transformed your business more to online and less to the farmers. Are you still doing the farmers market?
Yeah, I'm still doing the farmers markets. I realistically, it's not a long term thing. Hiring someone to do them is difficult because they have to store a bunch of wine. It's just kind of a hard day, and the amount of money I make is not really worthwhile to pay someone the excess amount of money that it takes to go through that hard day. Um, Also, I have to trust them to store the wine properly, and they have just tons of gear. So currently, I'm still doing farmers markets, and that's my plan for this coming summer. But the the first year, 100% of my money, I've had the winery for 5 years. I've had 3 years of sales, 2 years of aging before that, before I made my first sale. And so in those 3 years, my first year was 100% farmers market revenue. Second year was 90% farmers market, 10% online. And last year was about 50-50. So the online is growing quite a bit. And in that, I'm really finding a bit more of a marketing voice and just more customers who appreciate it, getting the word out more. I mean, it's pretty steady growth, but also that's what happens when you enter a global, like for me, it's United States marketplace, just where you have a lot more expanded reach than what I can do physically. So it expands what I do, and that's definitely the direction I'm pointing things. But in the end, that's kind of a means to an end, a means to get back to my hometown where my main goal is like, I want to live in my hometown. I want to give my kids a similar childhood to what I had, and I want to be run a successful business. And with that successful business, I want my town to receive a lot of that benefit. Not as far as like I'm not the kind of person who like donates a ton of money to charity or anything like that. That's not really my goal. My goal is to create a cool space for good minds to come together, have good conversations, and create a little bit more traffic through my town to allow other businesses to have now the potential customers to grow. And in that, it's like I want to do this for selfish reasons. I want to live in a cool town for the rest of my life. And to do that, I think I have to be successful and create the space that I want to create, um, to bring people in that I want to be with. So selling online expands my reach. It allows me to make more money. It's fun for me. I mean, I like being on Twitter and talking to Bitcoiners and marketing and everything. But in the end, the long term goal is to really just make my town a better place. And having that money come in from the outside allows me to fund that.
Yeah, it's I think a really good philosophy to be like, no, I'm not just traveling away, seeing some other places. Where can I live? Going to weird places to find a better place to live, but instead staying in your local roots and trying to make your local community, local town, whatever, a better place is something really really cool. I think there was like I don't remember who it was, like a really famous guy who went to went to like a rocket university, something like that, and he said like before I want to go up in space and do the rockets, I want to do something for here for the environment and do something for the world, the earth, before I go somewhere else. And it's I think it goes back to that this whole Bitcoiner thing that like that's also an interesting question for you. a lot of people say like Bitcoin fixes that, Bitcoin fixes everything. I have a little bit of a different view. It's like the Bitcoin is a base foundation to our life, and it does not fix anything, but with being a solid foundation, you have the possibility to do a lot better. It's like if you run on like a solid street, you're running really good and you can run fast, but you still need to train, you still need to work out, you still need to do something. And Bitcoin gives you the solid street, and on a fiat system, you're like running on sand and you're like falling in there, and it's just way harder to do stuff. What is your view on that? Like, is Bitcoin just money, or does it go deeper? And maybe also in that question in there, you had this low time preference before. I think because of the farm, you had this mindset also before you found Bitcoin, or did you get something of that also with Bitcoin?
I think the way you think about it is pretty similar to the way I think about it, in that humans are still human. There's going to be people that are not doing well. There's going to be people that are doing well. It's all relative. But for instance, if you live in, like, I had a pretty stable childhood. I was uprooted, lived in Austin, Texas, in the city, went out till I was 8, had a lot of great friends, and then moved to small town Colorado. So like I had one big uproot, but ultimately I had a stable family. Um, Money wasn't like always a fear, and food on the table. I had everything I needed and space to run around and play. And within that, I was able to like build myself into someone that I have high goals for myself, and um, was able to do well, or at least on the path of doing well. And if I grew up in a home that was unstable, whether it be emotionally or financially or moving around all the time, it's a lot harder to like grab who you are a lot of times and really build yourself up. There's more just survival. And so if the ground's always moving underneath you, like the fiat system's always kind of dragging you down, pulling you back, it's really hard to think long term and think those things that are going to bring you success in the long run. And so I don't think Bitcoin fixes everything. I think taking a longer time approach and having the ability to take a long time approach um, creates better solutions in the end. Because if we're just looking to duct tape everything, it's obviously going to start falling apart eventually. For me, my dad built houses his whole life. My mom was a realtor, and then when I was born, raised me. So but I think long term I get a bit of long term from both of them. My mom was just a super supportive mom, and was always like, you're going to be successful. You can be whatever you want to be. Her answer was always, you're going to be the president of the United States one day. That was kind of like the loftiest goal. Like, looking at it now, it's like, yeah, wow, I would not want to be a politician. But my dad always built houses and was always working, great role model as far as working goes. And I think he gave me a great framework for what life is, in the sense that he grew up, always wanted a farm, and his mom told him, well, farms are expensive and you're not inheriting one, so you better get to work. And so he worked his whole life, and eventually at 52 he sold everything, bought a farm, and retired to work 10 hours a day. And so, to me, I've always just had a view of retirement as, retire to mean money is not the thing that you're always working for. You're working for yourself, you're working for enjoyment. And so, with that, money's never really been the answer for me. It's always been, I want to find what I enjoy doing. And that's allowed me to like start this business and see the long term thing is like, no, I don't want to become this huge winery with a ton of employees and like worry about all these little things. I want to just create a small business that funds my lifestyle and save in Bitcoin, which allows me to think a little bit bigger in the future and not worry about my savings, just kind of have that hidden away. Like he had his real estate hidden away in his day, and build towards the life I want, which I just happen to be a person who enjoys being an entrepreneur, enjoys running a business. And that's what I want to do, whether it's big or small, I don't care. And I'm really leaning on the fact that like, I kind of like having my hands in everything and keeping things lean and using it as a vehicle to maybe like support my community, educate my community on Bitcoin, which is something I've always wanted to do, but like I need a little bit more success to be able to be listened to, and also to educate my family and support my family. And so um, that's all been the goal. It's not. I'm not. You don't get into wine to get rich quick. I don't think, but it's really just for the love of the game for me.
I think there are other ways, like there are other industries for people that really want to just go and get rich quick, and I think those are usually the industries and the people that actually lose over time because they want to have like a quick buck, but they don't see the long term goal. Like building something long term is so important. And you said like your dad was like 52 when he bought the farm. How old were you then? I think you were around,
I
right?
was 8, so
Eight.
that's when we moved to Colorado. Yeah, so 52 when I was a kid, that was like old. My dad's always been old. He was, what, 46, 44, 45 when I was born.
Uh,
So uh, now in hindsight, I'm like, damn, my dad retired when he was 50. Like that's badass. I want to do that. So like that's always been my goal, is to kind of through my 20s just figure out what I want to do with my life, try a bunch of different things. I'm not 30 yet, so I always think, now I'm thinking in my 30s is like, I have what I'm doing, let's just do that successfully, let's build a family, all that stuff. And then 40s, really succeed, just kind of be at the top of my game. And then 50s, like, you know whatever I want to do from there, hopefully I've made it by then. Goal is
is
to make it by then.
is your winery? How do you say it? Wine farm? What is it? Winery?
So yeah, winery is like the production of wine, and a lot of times that includes also the vineyard. We've got a vineyard as well. That's more my dad's doing than me. I run the winery.
Okay, and this is also on the farm of your dad, or is it like separate? Like it's a new location or something?
It's the I My foundation is my dad's grapes. My dad's Pinot Noir are the highest elevation Pinot Noir in North America. I make natural wine out of that, and it's that was what I had my history, because he made wine as a hobby. And so I knew that that wine would be good, but also to run the winery, I've had to expand towards buying grapes from other people just to be able to fill up all these barrels, because my dad's production is only so much, and year to year things shift a ton. So I can use that fluctuation to my advantage by having more space for different varieties at different times. Um, I My wine room is what his wine room used to be, but like I expanded it a ton. So there's a bit of family business in this, in that like when I was really at 26 just looking to start a business and looking for something that like wasn't a side hustle. I was like, what am a quarter life crisis? Like, what am I going to do with my life? And knew I wanted to start a business, but wanted to commit to something. And having my dad as a winemaker hobbyist was like, oh, you have all the infrastructure to like get me going. I can make however much wine I need to start, and then I'll just make a little bit more the next year and like continue to slowly expand as my wine ages and I sell it. And so basically, I grabbed on to what he was doing, took his hobby and scaled it up a lot, um, using a lot of his infrastructure. This is a building that he owns that I'm in the back of. That back wall's underground, so it's like perfect wine cellar. Um, but ultimately, as the son of a successful father, I want to like escape his shadow and do my own thing. So it's always been a bit of like I haven't quite made it yet. Like he loaned me money to start the business. So like once I pay him off, that's going to be the ultimate feeling of like, I made it on my own. I don't need you anymore. This is my thing. But in the meantime, I buy his grapes and I pay him back for the startup capital he gave me. And so I'm very cognizant of like really trying to make this my own thing. And whenever someone says like, oh, cool, it's a family business. I'm always like, it so is, and that's what I want it to be for my family, like the family I create as well. But this is so much like I want to make my mark on the world beyond or outside of what he's done, you know?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between family businesses where the son is basically just going on with that what the father created and just like doing whatever he did and just doing it a little bit modern maybe and sometimes just uh, going along with it, and the son that actually builds on the foundation what the father did and makes it way better, and in his own way, like as you said, the writing on the wall. It's interesting because my father always, and I have this so ingrained in my brain, he also built a business. He founded a company, like a construction company basically, and one day we were on a construction site with him. I was like maybe like 10, 12, something around that. But that scene is stuck in my head since then. And one of the workers there asked my dad, like, "Oh, this is your son. He will inherit your business and he will carry it on and stuff like that." And he's like, "My son is not even allowed to be in my business." He's like, he has to do it on his own. He has to find his own path, and if his path is exactly in that, and he finds his own way right here to my industry, my business, that's okay. I did not in the end till now, at least. But that's okay. But he always pushed me to do my own way, to do my own thing, like from really early on. I remember those things, and I think it's important, and I think it's also something that you have in there. But maybe like let's come back to like Bitcoin and like self custody, because I see. Yeah, go
On
ahead.
that real quick, it's interesting you say that because I think that I was my dad always gave me the freedom, like, you know, do whatever you're going to do. And there was never any pressure, like going to college. He always said, like, I never used my degree. College was the best time. You're going to learn a ton. You're going to meet a lot of great people. Go and, you know, figure out what you're going to do. Um, so I never really felt pressure to like do his thing, but like there was always subtle things like um, my job growing up every summer from like, you know, uh, 12 was to work on the farm. I hated it. And then a lot of times there was construction jobs that I had to do. And that was his, you know, both of those his things. And he's my boss. So I got to do it his way. And so I always kind of wish, like looking back, I kind of wish that I had it like you, where I was pushed out. No, you're not working for me. Go find your own thing. Because I think I would have found my thing quicker than being in a position where it was like, no, dad, like just total rebel, screw you, I don't want to be part of this. Whereas like what he's done is amazing and like I should be thankful, but I was kind of just my inherent rebellious mindset and just wanting to do my own thing so strongly, which is what led me to the path I'm on, pushed me out of. It was more of a rebellion than like a going to find my own thing, and I guess I just personally, I wish I'd been pushed out of the nest a little sooner. And I think the way your dad phrased it, that's really cool.
I'm super excited to announce that this podcast got the first ever sponsor. 21 Bitcoin is Bitcoin only from day one, and they teach and preach self custody. This is my go to exchange when someone asks me, "Oh, where can I buy my Bitcoin from?" This is the easiest entry for Bitcoiners. And if you want lower fees, plus at the same time support this podcast, use code Robin and click the link in the description. Yeah, it's an interesting journey. And I think as I mean, my dad was not that successful. Like he was not like a really rich dude, but he did like okay in middle class. And it's always interesting to see. And I have some friends that have really successful dads, and for them, I see the problems because they are like, as you said, living in the shadow, and they want to uh, come out of that shadow. But if the shadow is so big,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard sometimes, and it's interesting to see. Um, yeah, try to make now the way back to like self custody in Bitcoin, and I see your like you have in your background the wines, the barrels, I think they're called in English. Like I'm German native, so sometimes it's hard for me to find the right words. And did you had I think I speak with a lot of people about Bitcoin and a lot about the learnings of Bitcoin, and usually they come along with the story. Like a lot of people have like shitcoin phases and then come to Bitcoin only. A lot of people have all the Bitcoin on exchanges, then they have experienced pain, or they saw pain from other people, or they got educated and then they went into self custody. And then all those learnings you go through in the beginning. I'm curious about you because you had those like values and those self custody and self sustainability. I also guess like your farm made stuff that you like your own food, maybe like milk, I don't know, stuff like that. Um, how was your like Bitcoin journey unique because of your upbringing, because of the farm life, because of your mindset being different to like maybe a completely modern city living person?
In 2017, I guess was my first real exposure, and in that you're just like, oh, it's crazy. Let me like do 10 minutes of internet research, see what this is. Um, and in that internet research, all I saw was Bitcoin's old. All this other stuff is like new and exciting in the future. So like I bought a little Ethereum and a little XRP, and then you know bought the top of those. And for 4 years, I was just kind of they were there. I didn't look at them, but you know just didn't really think about it again. And what I was preached growing up was always like save. My dad always tells me stories of living in Aspen in the 70s and like living in a two-bedroom house with like 10 people and like having curtains for walls. And his whole deal was I always saved 50% of what I made. And to me, that's a little crazy. I mean, it's a different time. The money's obviously gotten a lot worse. It's a lot harder to save a high amount of what you're doing, but also like if you live with that much frugality, you definitely can. And so that frugal nature, wanting to save, wanting to be conservative with investing and all that stuff was very much ingrained to me. Um, I read a book about buying stocks, and in that book, I was like, "This is really interesting. There's no way I'm going to do this. That's so much work." So I was always buying index funds, having high interest savings accounts, paying the credit card bonus game where um, you just get a new credit card, they pay you $500, and um, I kind of was like, we're good. I got my savings account is keeping up with inflation. But in 2019, the interest rates on all my savings accounts went from 2% to zero. And I mean, 2% is not a ton, but like it kept me at float with inflation. And so that was kind of like the rug being pulled out from under me by the current monetary system, and realizing that there's no way I can just like slowly keep up without taking serious risk in the stock market, which I knew I didn't want to do. So within that, I just started kind of like looking. I was like, something's not right. What am I going to do? And then after I started the winery, and then I moved home to my hometown to build my house with my dad, I moved in with a good friend from high school who just happened to be a Bitcoiner. And him being like the smartest person I knew, we're having these conversations about geopolitics, money, finance, all that stuff. He's trying to make it in business as well. And so he just got me to start learning about Bitcoin. And yeah, I bought a couple more shitcoins throughout then, but like ultimately it was the path of learning about money. What is money? And learning that Bitcoin is the perfect money. Unfortunately, I started buying and the price started screaming. And right when I had my moment of like most intense conviction of like in my mind, I'm like, holy shit, that's what Bitcoin is. I need as much of this as possible, was also like a week before the price crashed 50%. So I'm at this full market conviction. The price has been going up for a year. In my head, I'm like, wow, if that's what this is and the price is going up like this, it's just going to keep going up forever. There's no way that the price will ever come down because Bitcoin's such an insane thing. How could anyone not value it? And so I went all in, and then, a week later, the price crashed 50%. And so I'm early stage winery that's made no money and invested 2 years. And previously, like all my money, except for this little nest egg that I hadn't touched, um, now I'm completely invested in wine and completely invested in Bitcoin, both of which have not seen returns, both of which have just really taken all my money. So I was fully convinced that I could, make it in wine, or was learning to be at least, and then fully convinced on Bitcoin. But really, just like that moment of, I think I'm gonna get rich. I think I'm gonna, like, it's all gonna come quickly. Oh man, I'm so smart. I'm doing the right thing. Was just like ripped out from under me, and I had to learn the hard way that Bitcoin is a low time preference game. Just like I was trying to play previously with like low savings, and low, low risk market, like index fund investments. And I've just kind of had to build slowly. And I think what that did is, like, I was the crazy dude, as a lot of us are. Like, a lot of our friends don't get Bitcoin, and so like I'm going crazy thinking about how cool it is. Then I lose all my, like, quote unquote all my money on it, and um, now I'm like, okay, well, no one's going to want to talk to me about this, or I just need more people to talk to, and then ended up finding the Bitcoin community on Twitter, and that furthered my conviction, realizing that there's like actually this huge amount of people that understand it outside of my tiny town where there's like five. So yeah, I don't know. It's been this slow game of every time I get really convicted on Bitcoin, it drops until finally I've just had to get the mindset out of my head that, like, there's no getting rich on Bitcoin quickly. It's just like save your money, take the lower time preference you have, the better, because it's really a survival game where if you put yourself in a position where the market swings can knock you out, they will. And if you can just survive, that's all it takes to win.
Yeah, I think it's funny how Bitcoin always humbles you if you get like greedy, if you get like a high time preference with all the traders, with everyone that ever touched like leverage stuff, with everyone that like wanted to sell Bitcoin, buy some altcoins just to outperform Bitcoin, get more Bitcoin in the end, like all those games and schemes that are involved in like trying the end goal of getting more Bitcoin. And for some, it worked, obviously, because they are lucky. For the most people, it did not work because they were humbled. But if you play those games long enough, you will get humbled anyways. So it's interesting to see. And also, as you touched on the perception in your town, and like five people got it, and this is kind of like I think in my town, it's also a really small town I'm living in, and even in the company there's like one guy that gets it, and it's one of my best friends that I got into the company. So it's not really fair that I say that there's one guy that gets it. It's kind of fair to say like nobody gets it. They're like two, three crypto guys that are staked in something altcoin related, and it's interesting how the mainstream is just so wrong about Bitcoin. Will that like do you see in future in like 10, 20 years where uh, those that what we are now talking on our small podcasts and on our Twitters and our Reddits and whatever we are on, is this like, do you see in future in like 10 years where people on national TV are talking about Bitcoin like we are doing, like really understanding the technology and the economic system behind it?
What I think about with that is really the need for financial education, where when I was learning about Bitcoin, and previously before that, I was really into like the minutia. I mean, I was listening to Fed stuff. I was, like I said, watching my savings account interest rate super closely. Um, Really, just like I had to, still have a deep spreadsheet of like all my info, um, that I keep track of. So I was like target one for noticing small changes, and then the huge shift with like financial policy and just like the rug of a lot of things with COVID shutdowns and money printing. And so that got me. But what I think about is all the people that along the way I tried to help with their personal finances, and realizing that they knew nothing about what money was, what their money was doing, investing, anything like that, and that's understandable for people in their early 20s. It's not, I'm really just pointing at like the general. That's what people are at, is they have never had to learn about their money, and if you're older, especially, you never had to learn about your money. You just did it this way. You invested, it worked out. But I think that that's like the inherent problem with Americans understanding Bitcoin, is that they've never had to think about their money because it's been a system that just works fine, especially for Americans. And they don't see the third order consequences of manufacturing leaving the United States because our money is too strong. So money just works for them generally, and they don't have to think about it. But over the coming decade, what I'm expecting to see is money increasingly not work for people. I mean, we saw a little flash of that with super high CPI numbers that got everyone caught up about inflation. And hopefully that opened the door, and some people realize like, oh, I need to actually learn what inflation is and why it's caused. Oh, it's money printing. So there's a few people that found it, but ultimately, like, if you didn't find it over the last bit, you probably were never just looking. You just trusted your sources, and maybe you got a good job during that time. Money's worked out for you. But the reason I think a lot of times we see people in more third world or developing countries, they need Bitcoin a little bit more because they don't have the sort of infrastructure or the functioning monetary system like we have in the United States. And so as things get a little bit more wonky that I expect over the next decade, I think people will just be more and more incentivized to actually learn about their money. So it's almost like, yeah, I think Bitcoin on its own merits is so good that people will learn about it and continue adopting it. But ultimately, you need a push to uproot your current understanding, go down the rabbit hole, and understand Bitcoin. So to me, unfortunately, I kind of expect that push to be on the negative side of people are like, oh crap, I really need to learn about Bitcoin because, or I need to learn about the current system, which leads them to Bitcoin because it's not working for me. What I'm trying to do with my business and just like provide education to my friends and anyone who's willing to listen, honestly, is to show the positive side where with Bitcoin, you can succeed, not with fiat, you'll fail. So I'm doing it slowly. Really, it's just like, I don't have a ton of presence in my local community right now. It's not something I can really afford to do. And so I just put, I'm a Bitcoiner on everything. It's just like, this is who I am. If you're curious, if you ever get curious, people know to come to me. I also have the Bitcoin logo on all my bottles going forward, and very much say on all my sales or all my in-person sales, Bitcoin preferred. Um, Not expecting to get a ton of Bitcoin sales. I do get a lot of Bitcoiners coming up, and it's super cool. But it's mostly just to like put that out there, associate Bitcoin, the brand, with my brand, the good wine, instead of Bitcoin for criminals. So like, let's associate Bitcoin with positive things. Let's associate Bitcoin with someone who's succeeding. And when I was like, when I'm starting my business or wanting to learn, what I look for is who's succeeding, why are they succeeding, how can I emulate that? And if someone can just like look at me and see, oh, Bitcoin, and they do Bitcoin, like, I think that's making the world, making their life better, which, like, extrapolate that out, makes the world better.
Which is really really cool inside of the Bitcoin community, because we are getting to this point and we're like, we're a small community still. I think Bitcoiners, we're getting really really big, but we understand that we should help each other, because if you succeed with your winery and getting bigger and bigger and making more sales, you save your money in Bitcoin, which is good for Bitcoin because you're a long-term hodler. And also your brand is associated with Bitcoin. So this also gets a brand benefit with Bitcoin, the same way as when my podcast gets bigger, it gets more audience, it gets more people educated. Like, we all have the incentive to root for each other, because we have the same unit of the same store of value where we save everything in, and we are incentivize to help each other. And it's such an amazing journey. I mean, the simplest example I think is the podcast, where I was so worried in the beginning that I don't get guests on. And now, since like I think 5th January or something like that, I'm now on a streak where I like have every day a podcast guest. Since then, it's like a month now, and then also the next month I'm already booked out. I sent the link to someone yesterday, and he's like, "Oh, I think your Google Calendar has like a mistake. I don't see any appointments free in February. Like now it's beginning of February." And I'm like, "No, actually, it's not a mistake. My next free appointment is like in a month." Because I'm so booked out. And it's not because I'm such a great person. It's just because people in the Bitcoin community want to help each other and want to root for each other, and they're really open. And it's like, I come from a fiat job where I'm in sales. I'm used to having like 20 no's and getting one yes. And in Bitcoin, it's like you're getting 19 yes and one no. It's like a really interesting experience to be in the Bitcoin community, and being in that uh, interesting early adopter community, and seeing everybody rise. Everybody's doing something. Everybody has something that's going on. Like, I did not see anyone that just does like an NPC stuff. I always like non-playable character. Probably you know it. Where when I see in my like outside of my bubble, outside of the Bitcoin bubble, you see a lot of people that they don't know what critical thinking is. They don't know what Bitcoin is. They just get stuff, and then they are just doing like what they're supposed to do, like school, maybe university, then work, retire, die, have maybe a girlfriend or a wife next to him, maybe have kids. Like, those are not bad things. Like having like those normal life is not bad at all, but they're not asking those questions like what money actually is. They're not asking, oh, is that what I hear really true? Like, they're like, no matter where it's coming from, but you should critical think for yourself. Like, and this is something, I don't know if it gets better with Bitcoin. Do you think like this can get better with on a Bitcoin standard, or will just get money fixed, and like those people that don't critical think will always be there? Like, is it something that fiat messed up, or is it some just human beings being lazy?
There's, I mean, just like any answer I'll give, like there's an element of that just in humans, but ultimately, I think being forced to always keep up, or living in a society where it's just kind of unrealistic to feel like you're really going to make it, that you don't really, you're not trained, or you don't feel like it's even possible to think bigger than where you currently are, or just a couple steps ahead. But I think that with that strong foundation that Bitcoin can give to society, um, I think more and more people will be able to pick their head up and like look further down. Because what I'm hearing you say is people that phrase it however you want, but ultimately are kind of just like doing the thing that gets them to the next day, the short term enjoyment. Yeah, I mean, like people, a lot of people that we would characterize as NPCs are super proficient on a certain thing. Like there's a lot of people that go to the gym all the time, but still just like grind, wake up at their job, party on the weekends. I guess I'm not necessarily trying to demonize that. It's just a stereotype, and they don't, people a lot of times don't ask questions like what can like life fulfillment really be. It's, oh, I'm going to make it and be rich one day, or oh, I guess I'll just have this house and make it, and I'll have a family and we'll be happy. And ultimately, like, part of me is a little bit jealous of that, because you not thinking about these existential questions is a bit of a freedom. But you think back to where they actually are, where their basis is a lot of times just kind of indentured servitude, where they have to keep their job, they have to have this mortgage, and ultimately all those things are not going to lead towards the uh, outcome that they want. They should, because they're doing the right thing. They're saving money. They're just living their life and doing what they're good at their job. But ultimately, with money sucking people down, just the fiat system being a black hole, I think a lot of people are just going to be in for a rude awakening and be forced to approach these concepts through a time or a feeling of fear or just scrambling to make things work. Whereas if you're thinking about them ahead of time, you can be prepared and not freak out if something bad happens. So that foundation, I think, just allows people to broaden their mind and broaden their perspective. I don't think it's like inherently a human thing, but there's always bits of that in there.
Yeah, it's I think about it a lot, and I mean, it's not only about Bitcoin and critical thinking. It's like I have such a huge desire to build something that's so much bigger than me and everything that I see, and I'm grinding a lot and making the podcast next to like a full time job now. I'm scaling back a little bit the full time job, but it's something that only a few people do, and sometimes I see friends or even family members that are just like making their normal job, going home, eating, Netflix, chill, sleep, and I think like, oh shoot, I cannot do that. Like I feel really
Mm-hmm.
I just can't do it. But it's maybe like they are happy. Obviously they're not like feeling depressed. They're not like on the edge of like suicide or something. Like they are happy. They're just less just living their lives, and it's an interesting thing that some people like have this urge to do a lot and critical think and to research so much, and then you see the world where like, oh, they are just living their life and being in the system, and they're happy with it. And sometimes like, yeah, why am I this the person there?
But that's really, I would say, our common upbringing with parents who had their own business, and the goal was to do your thing, and the expectation was kind of to have your own business or uh, be successful in whatever way you see fit, as opposed to someone that comes from a family that there's nothing wrong with having a job. I think a lot of people, like, entrepreneurship is super glorified these days, and if it's not just in your nature, if it's not something you have to do, if you're not going insane just having a normal job, I think you're crazy to want to start your own business, because it takes so much, and you have so much responsibility on your shoulders. Like, you got to be, if you're, let's say you've had a job your whole life, um, but and you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. Let's say you played sports. If you weren't the kind of person that like wanted the ball on the last second, like you wanted all the responsibility, you thrive when times are crazy. If you're not that kind of person, I think entrepreneurship is a pretty scary thing, because it is all the time all on you. Yeah, you maybe you build to a point where you have employees underneath you, but realistically, like, their success is all pinned on you if you're at the top. So if you don't want that, it's insane to go into entrepreneurship. So with that, I just like, when I think about Bitcoin, it's like, yeah, maybe you, as a society, we all have savings. We can all kind of pitch in, and you can afford to take more risk because either your family has savings to help back your new idea, your community does, or you do because you were actually able to save. But I don't think it creates more entrepreneurship necessarily. It maybe creates people that are more comfortable with taking risks because they know the downside isn't so bad. But ultimately, it's a human trait to want to go off and do your own thing. And I just want to live in a world where if you go to work and do your job and have a nice family and just spend less money than you make, I want that to be the mark of success. And then anyone who wants to go and do other stuff, like, great. But ultimately, like, it comes down to just, if what you do makes you happy, and you work hard, like, I'm not saying slouches, but if you work hard and are diligent, I think that should be enough to make it in a realistic world. And that's really the world that I'm fighting for with Bitcoin. I mean, all the stuff on top of it, like all the third order effects of having sound money, I think will come. But ultimately, it starts with just people being able to go to work, come home to their family, enjoy their life, whether they want to watch Netflix or not, and have a have a life that they can survive and put their kids in a better position than they were in.
It's I think that's a really, really a good point to see, because then you have the all the people having a device where they can effectively store their financial energy again in there, and it's always like this. And I think it's so nice that Michael Saylor, a Bitcoiner, bought Hope.com and reserved it for basically Bitcoin education, because when I speak with Bitcoiners, hope is like always like some central word or some theme that goes along in the conversations, because it gives like the hope back to people that just like, can save again. And like if you're a doctor, you're like really good in saving people's life, and you should not be forced to be a portfolio manager on the side with your ETFs and index funds and stuff like that. You should just have like one savings device where you put your money, and this is it. Like this is where your financial energy can grow. And you're a doctor, or maybe you're a teacher, or whatever you are, you don't have to be forced to be a financial planner, and stock portfolio manager on the side to keep up with inflation, so your savings don't get eroded. Like that's a really important thing, I think, in the whole Bitcoin sphere.
And we sell that vision to our friends and anyone that we're like trying to get into Bitcoin. But ultimately, like, yeah, sure, take a 4 year time perspective. But what you and I are talking about is like day to day, every year, the value of Bitcoin goes up, not measured in dollars, but measured in real world goods. That's like the long term vision of sound money, where everything gets cheaper because we get better at making it. But when we're selling that vision, that is taking like 4 or 5 steps into Bitcoin that people haven't really had the chance to grapple with yet. Everything foundationally leading up to that, they don't understand how money printing just like steals from everyone, and they don't understand the current monetary system at all, much less Bitcoin. So I sell that vision too, but we're in this really hard part of like understanding Bitcoin, because you sell that vision and then you see these huge upswings in the Bitcoin price, and people are like, okay, cool, so I could just lose all my money like you did tomorrow. What are we doing? And it's really the only way to educate is to find someone that like actually has a problem, find a way that Bitcoin solves it, because most people are not actually interested in learning about finance and money. They just want to put their money away and see it grow, just like we want them to with Bitcoin, which is the most frustrating thing, because this is exactly what you want, but you don't see it that way. You see the booms and busts, you see it as risk, when ultimately it's this super safe asset that's just not going to change. And game theory wise, it's a pretty hard to argue against its adoption. So like I man, when I get people curious, I'm just like, get a little bit and hold it there, watch the price every once in a while. If anything, if you're going to keep buying, I just always dollar cost average. Like, don't get the lump sum stuff. That's how I got in trouble. Dollar cost averaging would have made me totally fine. Um, but just sit on it, because I know how long it takes to educate yourself about Bitcoin, and I know that you're not going to do it unless you're actually motivated to do it yourself. No one's going to like you said, you told me that you were trying to prove your friends wrong. Motivation, and you spent a whole weekend just diving into it, and by the end, you were convinced about Bitcoin. That's pretty rapid. A lot of people are not going to spend that much time. So it's like this, I need you to find a way to have this slow, you can just like slowly learn about Bitcoin. And I think the first thing is just have a little bit, have your money invested, whether it's like, 50 bucks, $100, whatever it is. Like, you've been hearing me rattle on about this. If you're willing to do that, I think eventually maybe you get into it. And like, unfortunately, it's probably going to be when the price starts going up. But so you won't get the price that you would get now, but ultimately, like, you should DCA anyway. So I don't know. I mean, we're still so early to Bitcoin that it doesn't matter. Like, as long as our friends get interested in it eventually, over the next few years, I think they'll be fine. And ultimately, like, we're in still so in the early adopter stage that it takes a lot of people that are either super disaffected by the current system, or have an entrepreneurial mindset, or are just super interested in the technology of money to really get involved, or some outside thing that they get sucked into it. for a different reason and then realize that they're into Bitcoin. But like the everyday average person, I get it. Like, you got your job, you got your friends, you got what you like to do. You don't want to learn about money and finance. And I mean, it's a failing of our education system. I think it's on purpose, but it's just the realistic spot we're in is that people don't care and they will care eventually. And, you just want your friends to care for positive reasons and not because something bad happened to them.
Yeah, I think as the pain grows and the current fiat financial system, and that's kind of a sad thing. But as the pain grows, and we see it with third world countries, and we see it where's the adoption really big, like Nigeria, El Salvador. Those are not the countries like Germany, Austria, America. Of course, there are also Bitcoiners, and there is also adoption there, and there's also people that get it, but it's completely different to what is in the third world countries that actually need it a lot more. And this is why I also decided to make my podcast in English and not in German, because my native language is German, and I wanted to do in English because I wanted to be able to talk with African Bitcoiners, and I already had three on. I wanted to talk with Bitcoiners all over the world to get a different views on the podcast and learn about that. And so important to get so many different views also in there. We are having an end routine, and the time flies by really quickly in this podcast. I think we're having an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest, and it's an interesting experiment. To that question, nobody can give you an exact answer, but it's an interesting thought experiment. Also, do the scarcity of Bitcoin. How many coins do you think will be lost in the year 2130? And can those coins technically ever be recovered?
Interesting. You had a technology person before me. I'm very much a low tech thinker when it comes to Bitcoin. Um, I mean, it seems obvious that most of the coins that have been lost, like ever, will have been lost in the past. Right now, in 2030, I'm pretty bullish on the development of the store of wallet technology, of adopting Bitcoin, and like a little bit more fail safe. So it's I mean, the fact that like we write down 12 or 24 words and that's our wallet is great. Like, I mean, there's a lot of use cases for it, but ultimately it's super stone age compared to what I expect us to get to. So sure, I think Bitcoin will be lost in those days, but like it's going to be more in the order of coins or maybe hundreds of coins as opposed to anything else because I think we're just going to be so much better at storing Bitcoin, at keeping hold of it, and it has so much more value. Especially by 2030, it has so much more value that there's so much more incentive to keep it going. Where like most of the coins lost, where when Bitcoin didn't really have much value, people got it, maybe it dropped. There was no like obvious path to Bitcoin succeeding back then for a lot of people, so they just forgot about it, got a new computer, whatever it was. And with Bitcoin entering like the global monetary stage as a global payments technology that's actually being adopted around the world, it has a ton of value stored in it. I just don't really see much Bitcoin being lost in the future.
Yeah, also things like most people that lost Bitcoin till now, obviously there's exceptions to it, but most people that lost Bitcoin, it's because they bought it or mined it when it was like €1, and then they forget it, bought it, they saved it on some laptop or something like that, and they threw away the laptop, not thinking about the Bitcoin on there, something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously, you're right. As the value grows on Bitcoin, more and more people are like, oh, how do I take care of the Bitcoin, because they're actually worth a lot of financial energy, however you want to measure it. Before we end the podcast, where can people find you the best? Where can people get in touch with you? Is there anything you want to add to our conversation in the end?
So I make natural wine and ship it all over the United States. My website is peonylanewine.com, PEONYLANE wine.com. Give me a shout on Twitter at Ben Justman. Currently, what I'm really working on, what I'm really excited about, is a project I started in 2021 when I was really just into the throes of Bitcoin. Was I made all my wine, and throughout that process, I was just watching each barrel because there's a pretty wild differentiation in taste between each barrel. I mean, like if they're all cap softs, like they're still all cap softs, but within that, there's a more fluctuation than you'd expect. And so back then, I picked out the best barrel of my wine in the entire cellar. It ended up being a Cabernet Sauvignon 2021, and picking out that best barrel, bottled it all. It's 210 bottles, and I'll be selling it as my Bitcoin wine, Satoshi's Reserve. So keep an eye out for that. That's what I probably will have coming up when this comes out. Really exciting for me because I've got Bitcoin on my labels. I sell wine for Bitcoin. It's all fun, but like I've never done anything that's specifically a wine bottle meant for Bitcoiners. No one who's not into Bitcoin is going to buy this wine realistically. So it's been almost 3 years coming to get this project to fruition, and it's really exciting to be nearing the final steps of it and be releasing it to the world.
I'm so looking forward to the launch of it. Unfortunately, I'm not in the US, but actually, I know for a fact that because I have sponsors and I track my links, 70% of listeners and viewers that watch all my content are actually coming from the United States. So I think the podcast audience is highly likely that there are some people from the US sitting here in front of the screen and watching that. And I highly recommend checking the wine out. And maybe I'm coming to United States once to check out the wine in some area. Thank you, Ben, to be on, and it was great having you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.